Hey, what's up, guys? It feels really weird lately. I got so used to Fire Emblem Heroes just straight up spitting a whole bunch of content at us. I was wondering what I should do for a topic today, and then I realized, wow, I've been really spoiled lately because Heroes has been coming out with content nearly every other fucking day, so I don't exactly have to think about, oh, what am I gonna do today? Because something just came out today, and of course I have to cover that shit. You know, people want to hear people talking about the latest things, like when Legion Revival comes back out, and I don't know, Volter should be coming to GHB next week, pretty soon.
Okay.
I don't remember when exactly. I'll probably go check. That's gonna be some fun. We'll definitely talk about that when that happens. We'll see if I can't beat Infernal on that one. From what his weapon and stats look like, he's gonna be one hell of a boss to fight. He may even be on the level of strength like Camus and Xander were as a character, not necessarily GHB, but as their character. And they may not revive him later on due to that strength. Who knows? Maybe IS has learned their lesson and they ended up not making too strong of a character this time around. We'll see. But with this one, I figure that I would change things up a bit. As you can already tell, I'm using a completely different team than usual. I decided to take my entire team, the characters I love to use all the time, and just throw them out the window, replace them with a completely different team. Now, it's not perfect by any means, but I end up making it work right here. I know there's a lot of fans of Lyn, so you'll be happy to see that I'm using her now. Got Legion in here because he's a bonus hero.
Let's go.
Gwendolyn because she's a blue tank and she can really deal out some punishment if you time it right. And of course, I need Soren because somebody needs to be out there for these Corins, these Reinhardts, these Olwins. If you don't have some sort of blue magic check specifically, you are playing in the wrong meta. And I guess that's what the theme of this video is going to be today, is not to be shackled or imprisoned by the meta.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, the meta exists for a reason, but just because the meta exists is no reason that you can't play the game how you want. You don't necessarily have to play with a merged Ike like I do. You don't have to play with a Reinhardt, you don't have to play with any other characters, or you don't have to play with the flavor of the month just because everybody says they're strong. You don't have to play with a defense ploy est just because some website told you you should. You can play with generally any character and have some relative success with them, which is what I'm trying to prove here. So all I have to do is kind of balance the team and essentially pick some characters that can synergize well with each other a little bit. I've got my main tank, I've got my initiation unit, I have my hybrid right there. So my tank is Gwendolyn, my initiation is Legion because he's basically an Axe Lucina based off of his stats. Lyn, I did a hero spotlight on her, and I'm very confident in how and when I use her. So that's why she's in here. Soren is probably my most reliable green mage, having a decent stat spread with a competitive attack. So I can actually get use out of pretty much everybody on the team. They also have a lot of movement abilities, which help me out a lot. Gwendolyn has reposition. Legion has reposition, and Soren has swap, which helps immensely. I feel like if you don't know what kind of support skill to give to a unit, you could probably never go wrong with the movement one. For example, drawback, swap, reposition, some of my favorite ones.
My turn?
Yes.
But anyway, when you build a team, what you're trying to do here is build a composition that complements each other. First, you want to start very general. Get your colors covered. And when you first put your team together, you might make some switches, which is what I did with this team, because I initially started out with like Lucina, Soren, Hinoka, and Legion. But at that point, I didn't really have many bait units, and that's how I like to play. That's kind of like my play style. I usually like to bait rather than just jump in. So I ended up replacing Lucina, Hinoka, obviously, and I ended up coming up with a better team composition because, like I said, Legion's kind of a axe Lucina, just to generalize it a lot without going into detail. So I didn't exactly need both Legion and Lucina, therefore I was able to pick someone else more with like a different role besides initiation player phase unit.
Yes?
I also had, I think it's actually pronounced Karel. I actually want to get it right this time, as opposed to the stream where I was just being a dick, calling him Carl.
Certainly.
Side note, if you ever want an animal to live well past their lifespan, give them a dumb fucking name. I had a goldfish one time, and obviously they don't usually live very long, but I called him Carl, and he fucking lived for, I don't remember how long, but he wasn't supposed to live that goddamn long, especially not a goddamn carnival fish. Anyway, when I say you don't need to be shackled by the meta, you should at least be knowledgeable of it. Like, you're gonna see Ninos, because they're very strong. You're gonna see Reinhardts. So you're gonna want to have units that you can use in anticipation of the meta. So you don't necessarily have to be shackled or imprisoned by the meta, like you must only use these characters, or you must bring these characters because of these characters, like being required to bring an Ike or a Xander because most people have Hector, or needing to bring a Nino or a Julia because of Reinhardt or Summer Corrin, or maybe some other things. You can be knowledgeable of these characters and still counter them in different ways. You could even counter them with a character that is definitely not suited for the task. For example, Xander would be the last thing you would ever want to attempt to counter, you know, some magic, maybe Celica or something. However, if you have a team that gives him Fortify Resistance, and then you put another character next to him with Spur Resistance and just generally try to beef up that bulk a little bit, or maybe you could support him in a way where you just beef up his attack beyond all comprehension, so this way he can take the first attack and then kill on the counter so he doesn't die. There are many ways you can approach many different situations. You may find yourself stuck in a crappy situation, or maybe not even the best way to deal with a situation.
Yes?
But there are ways.
Let's see.
Got it.
You can tell from the gameplay I'm not dealing with threats maybe in the best way, but I'm dealing with them how I can, if that makes sense. You can see here I'm not exactly in the best situation because armored units aren't terribly known for having resistance, but her being on a defensive tile, she should have much greater bulk than she otherwise would.
Orders.
So what I'm going to end up doing is trying to mitigate how much damage my characters take. Luckily, only Legion dies, but that's because of his terrible resistance. I had to swing Lyn over because I knew they would go after the weakest link, and when you anticipate things like this, then you can come back to essentially counter what they're going after. You're not going to end up beating everything perfectly every time, but you can still manage.
Yes.
You may not have the best units available to you
Got it.
because RNG is a bitch and won't give you that Ike or won't give you that Celica or any other unit you want. Maybe Julia or something. Hector. Some of the...
Orders.
Or maybe Defense Ploy Est. Maybe the game isn't giving you the best units that you could possibly use in every single situation, but you can use what you have and still succeed. I am using characters that I almost never use, and I'm doing pretty well considering what I'm running into. Like, when I was recording this, in my head, every time I came to a new battle, just like an alarm went off in my mind, like, oh fuck, this is gonna be bad. Like, I'm gonna end up saving this recording, and I get absolutely demolished, and I'm gonna have to embarrass myself in a video. Luckily, that's not the case. I lose a unit here and there. Granted, you'll want to try and go for Deathless whenever you can, but sometimes you make a mistake, and you just have to go on from there and manage it from there. If you absolutely have to make a sacrifice, build your strategy around it, so this way you can end up winning anyway, instead of... Sometimes I try to go Deathless so hard that I shoehorn my characters into a corner, and then they all die instead. That's happened way too many times. So now, if I position my units incorrectly, or if I'm surprised by something, I just have to manage from there. It happens sometimes. We're not all perfect all the fucking time. Sometimes we don't even have good IVs on our characters, but there's still ways to make them decent. Minus attack Ike isn't the end of the world. You just have to replace his heavy blade because he can't get as much value out of it. I've seen many Ikes out there with a Fiore Vantage build, and they can seriously wreck some face. The fact that they lose attack also means that their other stats are either unaffected or buffed. IVs in the meta, you don't have to be shackled by them, but be knowledgeable. That's my advice.